Hey, hello everybody and welcome. As you all know, I'm Shirra and I'm in the Center for Health Science Education, and we are in this series of webinars talking about literacies. So that is ways that people understand the world in whatever environment they're involved with. And today, particularly, we're going to focus on the ways in which you can incorporate your teaching evaluations into your teaching portfolio. It is my experience that when people do have to submit a portfolio, particularly for a reason like for probation or for promotion, they tend to tick the boxes of what the headings on a portfolio are. And I'm often asked the question, don't you have a template that we can just use and then, we'll have the perfect teaching portfolio? And the answer to that is, of course, there is no template. Everybody's teaching is different. Everybody thinks differently about their teaching. And so even having listed headings, which is what we do have, does constrain a little bit of what you could exhibit in your teaching portfolio. So with that as an introduction, I do want to know your experience of having your lectures evaluated versus completing your teaching portfolio, and if you've ever really worked on integrating your students' feedback into the bits and pieces that you have in your portfolio. So first I want to go around the room and ask everybody if you can drop into the chat, do you have a teaching portfolio? And if you do, how do you feel about it? Is it mostly complete because you've used it for things, or are you unsure about it? And because we're a small group, I do have to tell you, I can see who's here and who's answering me in the chat. So you don't have to write in the chat. You can open your microphone and talk as well. I really don't mind that too.
Shirra, it's Philippe. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, Philippe. Excellent. I'd love to hear from you. Won't you share?
So the last time I really looked at integrating the evaluations from the students and the teaching portfolio was ages ago. And I actually need to revisit that just to update the CV. And obviously the content needs to be updated as well. And I think from our side, I say our as in the department, it's been a bit of a struggle getting to grips around the Blue Explorers and getting feedback from the students, and and you are fully aware that the response rates are usually quite low, and it doesn't really reflect completely on your capabilities. And previously, I think you or Trish might have done the peer evaluation, and that's kind of missing from my evaluation. So it's difficult to integrate an older evaluation. So it's kind of like a brief overview and a bit of a struggle that myself and others in the department are grappling with at the moment.
So that's very insightful and interesting for me to hear, because as I think you might be aware, we are working on a much larger peer evaluation system now within the faculty. So you can request a peer evaluation from CHSE or from a number of evaluators who we're now training with regard to the capacity to evaluate the teaching, not just the topic. So not the content so much as how the lecturer is performing in relation to their students. So you raise a number of really valuable points. The first one being that student response rates to especially the Blue Explorers type of survey is not high. And one of the university's aims for the 2024-2025 switch between teaching plans is to work on student literacy in terms of responding to evaluations. So in other words, evaluation literacy on the part of the students, because I don't think students really understand how very influential their feedback can be when we're dealing with particularly putting together a teaching portfolio for a particular reason, like an award or progression. So I'm looking in the chat to have a look. Rebecca, yes, it's nice to start, and I do think that it's a work in progress always. So even if you move on to completely different teaching responsibilities, what you were thinking and what you had from before follows you through. And Kennedy, certainly, what happens is when you reach a milestone. So, like, if you're a full professor, why do you need to keep a teaching portfolio going? Because where else is there to go? I mean, except notches in full professordom, I guess. But but it is important to keep it going because of a lot of other reasons. For example, developing your trajectory as a university teacher, much easier if you've got a current portfolio to work on. Yeah, I think it's common to put together a portfolio for application. And Bruno, I like your word. I somewhat have a teaching portfolio. Yeah, so that's an interesting approach because you've got stuff, but you don't really know kind of how to put it all together. So let's take the discussion from here. And that is, yeah, there are several ways you can develop a portfolio. One of the most compelling ways is when you have to fill in the staffing and promotion sheets that we get. And so what I want to do is, first of all, start with that document. If you can just show me a reaction with a thumbs up or a wave of a hand or something. How many people have not seen the faculty CV document for promotion? So I didn't see a show of hands. How many have not seen the faculty CV document? Everybody's seen it?
I've seen it.
Yeah. It's quite the document, isn't it? Perfecto. Thank you. So all the personal details and stuff is obviously stuff you have to hold on to. Your qualifications, positions where you worked, and for our purposes, we start in section 4. They say, submit personal reflective statements summarizing your educational philosophy, how it informs your pedagogy, how it informs your assessment, curriculum development, mentoring and support, postgraduate supervision and scholarship relative to the established promotion criteria. Okay, which is a big chunk. And then they work on the technicist stuff, the stuff that's supposed to be easy to fill in, but if you haven't filled it in, it can take you hours to track down what you've got. So what is your undergraduate teaching? And then it says, please include a self-assessment of curriculum development done for the course, student assessments and ratings as per guidelines of CHSE as an attachment, and any other external comments. So this is really the part that I think we need to work on, because putting in the number of hours that you've worked with people, although it takes a long time, is quite technicist, and it's not for discussion. There are timetables and things that people kind of work with. Not only that, distinguishing between undergraduate and then postgraduate teaching is also not so difficult, although sometimes harder to pin down the time you spend on postgraduate teaching and then on supervision of honours students, master's students and doctoral students. And then they do give you space to talk about clinical training as well, which I don't think is so insightful. So if anybody's got ideas on a better way of talking about clinical training, I'm very open to take this up with HR. So internal and external examining, whatever. So that's all just fill in the blanks of what you've done. But 4.8 again is where you have to start thinking about things. And that is speak about your contribution in your department, well, and also personally towards curriculum development and change, the throughput rates, and the postgraduate profile of students. So all of that seems fairly straightforward in terms of numbers, but I want to go back then to what they've told you to do with those numbers, which is to submit personal reflective statements. So how many of you actually took that seriously when you were thinking about putting your portfolio together?
Hi.
All right, then it's, yes,
Hi. I'll give some comments. I can't say I didn't take it seriously. I did take it seriously, but I almost felt unsure of what I was writing. I felt like I was writing a whole lot of things and rambling, but it wasn't quite directed. And so I feel like it's like I was driving the direction, but I was confused about the direction myself. Yeah.
I think that does happen. And Tash, I do see your comment there. You're looking for feedback, like student feedback on what you're doing, and you're not really sure how to change things as a result of that. You do know that there's lots of informal ways that you can get feedback from your class. And one of the first ways is opening a discussion on Uwazi and asking some structured questions and making it compulsory for your class to submit answers before they see everybody else's answers. So that's one way of getting feedback that is not really then usable for promotion purposes. And the other way is to do a minute paper with your class. Do you remember what minute papers do? You can choose one question. So you can say something like, what's the one thing you really didn't understand in this class that we've just done? Or the more common one, what's the wow factor? What really blew you away and you didn't know in the class that we've just done? Or what were the two things that you felt were most important to cover in this topic? Or what were the things you thought were not covered in this topic that you thought were going to? So you get what I'm saying. There's no fixed question. And then while the class is actually sitting there, you get them to fill in their 2 or 3 sentences and just to hand it in. Can be completely anonymous. So even if you've got a class of 380 or however big the classes you're teaching, you don't have to, of course, read every single one. You can skim through for the ones that look interesting. Again, because it's an informal way of getting feedback from your class. So you don't have to stick to the classic blue explorers because I'm a lecturer and I've got a course number that I'm going to get a course evaluation. So now I'm going to ask you, as a matter of interest, how many of you have ever used the Blue Exploring system for evaluations? So your students giving feedback on your actual lecturing? Anne, yeah, Philippe?
No, that was just I have.
Yeah, specific. Yeah. Okay. Purnima. All right. Although you can ask a question, I know I'm still open to that.
No, I was literally raising my hand to answer to your question.
No, it's fine, Kennedy. Yeah, it's fine. No, that's okay. So, Blue Explorers, in my experience, and I have also used it, is great if you're one of a few lecturers, so under 10 lecturers who lecture in a specific course, where there's one course code and where there is a fair number of students. By that I mean, more than 30 students in the class. That kind of works. And it really only works as you finish teaching, or in the middle of the teaching that you're doing, so that students are aware of who you are. And it works best if you're teaching like a block. So you're teaching 20 lectures out of a course or something like that. That's a very small set of circumstances. Does that apply to anybody here, that you would be doing that kind of teaching? Again, I'm hoping the ones who've used Blue Explorers are the ones who respond, yes, it does apply to them.
I think my thing with the Blue Explorers, all my lecturing is in first block. So I can't really do like a follow-up and see my so
if you missed it, you missed it. It's one of the very big difficulties of Blue Explorers, as far as I'm concerned, is that they only allow you to send surveys out in the block that you're teaching. So if you suddenly find out you need an evaluation and you had taught in the first block, you aren't able to do a Blue Explorers evaluation. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, for very low response rates. If you're not in progress of teaching the students, they don't know who you are. They can't remember what your name was or what you taught them or anything. They don't really pay that much attention. So it's very hard to use the Blue Explorers unless exactly as they've set it up. We are, Tina, and you can open this discussion too, still in negotiation with them about what they could do for our particular circumstances, which are small groups that rotate regularly in one course with one course code with about 50 lecturers, and where different groups experience different things. And so you can't send a whole evaluation thing to a class. I agree with you, Kennedy. Students don't pay attention, so they don't know who taught when and who it was. Tina, go ahead.
Sorry, Shirra, I apologize for joining late, but I'm going to open a can of worms.
I'm happy for you too. This is what the discussion's about.
I don't know if you're aware, but my colleague and I, so I'm a medical doctor, I'm joint staff, I work at Helen Joseph Hospital, so I don't do I do teach the large group lecture once a year in the GEMP program. The rest of the time I do bedside teaching 4 or 5 times a week at the bedside with 10 students. I also teach postgrads, which is anywhere between 5 to 10 at a time. So if this is your experience, then I'm going to just tell you what our experience was with Blue Explorers. We tried it. It didn't really work. We got, because it was sent away from the teaching sessions, the students got confused as to the purpose of Blue Explorers. So they often ended up giving us feedback about the whole rotation instead of an individual lecturer. And then we met with Blue Explorers, and with the CEO of Africa of Blue Explorers, because we got pulled into that conversation, and we were told by Wits CLTD that the requests we had to do small group more frequently ad hoc was not possible, and the Blue Explorers team came on and literally showed us on screen how to do it. So I think there's a big disconnect between what the product can offer and what Wits is allowing the product to do. And we were concerned because we were told that an entirely new product was going to be introduced, so we didn't keep fighting. But I see Blue Explorers is still with us, so perhaps we should pick up that fight again, Shirra. So my experience with Blue is it doesn't work for postgraduate teaching, it doesn't work for small group teaching, and if those are your spaces, then you can give it a go and say you tried. But I think that the CHSE offering is perhaps more suited. If that's still running, Shirra, I'm not sure. Thanks.
It is still running. And that was where I was going to go in this discussion. So, Tina, this discussion really is about literacies. We're trying to look at developing reflections as required by this whole staffing and promotions thing, and in most teaching portfolios, as a result of getting student feedback. And what I'm trying to make a distinction between here is that there is a difference between student feedback as Tash is asking for it in order to make a difference to her teaching versus student feedback because staffing and promotions, for example, has said that you need evaluations to show for yourself as evidence of the kind of teaching that you're doing. So there are a whole lot of conversations going on in this area. The first one is that the university has re-signed up with Blue as a company for determining, it's like a dipstick idea of student experience. So now there's a lot of discussion across the university and people are saying different things. And I think that's part of our conversation too, is how valuable really is it? First of all, if you only get 2 or 3 students out of a whole class who respond, and that's of a class of 30 or 40 or something, not just a group of 10. And how much can that help you to be reflective or help you to think about the kinds of teaching that you're doing? So do you think that a small number of responses can help you with that? I mean, Philippe opened up by saying that is a problem, that we get a small number. So if you're talking about kind of minute paper responses, and Tina, I'll get you in 1 minute, that we were talking about, in other words, student feedback, and it's anonymous and it's useful for you. It doesn't matter how many students respond. It's the ones that have taken the trouble to do it that will be giving you the kind of feedback information you need. But in a survey situation, if we're looking actually for validity and reliability, so I don't think those surveys are valid at all and certainly not reliable. Tina, go ahead.
Chair, I just wanted to highlight another issue with Blue is if you make the effort and you go and you submit an application for your survey to go through, and students do respond, but they don't meet the criteria for Blue, for which they will collate the data, which is 5%, then you will have this feedback that you won't gain access to either, not for lack of effort, but just because a system issue kicked you out. So yeah. I agree with you. I think that the challenge is people that want feedback for the purposes of improving teaching are often doing it themselves ad hoc, and that feedback is used to grow. And I think people are doing that everywhere in whatever method they use. But then if you want a dual purpose product that does both that and allows you to submit for staffing and promotions, I'm not sure that Blue is applicable to everybody. And then you had to create a new solution in our faculty, Shirra,
we did,
which I felt was a bit unfair, but that's my opinion.
It's still part of the global discussion, but I think we're now separating this out into several things. So if we're taking notes on the idea of where we're going with lecture evaluation as a literacy, the first thing is that there are some products that are just not suitable for bringing you the kind of information that is necessary, number one. Number two, the information that you get is useful in different scenarios. So we're today focusing on feedback in order to improve your own practice, which is what the literacy part of that evaluation is, and how you would do that, particularly if you're looking at developing a new teaching portfolio, is that you shouldn't expect amazing feedback. I'm, as many of you know, a very experienced teacher. I've been doing this for a very long time. And I do take feedback seriously. And the feedback is not always good. Not only because there are days, of course, when you can have a bad day and where you're just doing a plug and play because you haven't had an opportunity to prepare something radical, new and different. But also because when you try something radical, new and different, students hate it, because it's not in their comfort zone of how will I learn this stuff? Will it be in the exam? Why do I have to do this rad stuff that you're asking me to do? And in what way will it benefit me? So the idea that student feedback should get better and better as you progress as a teacher is actually a false idea, because you can have student feedback for the different things that you do, and your feedback can change radically if you're doing radically different things. And so seeing a trajectory of, I started off with okay feedback and now I get amazing feedback, for me is not an indication of somebody growing as a teacher. It's an indication of somebody knowing how to please students more and more. And pleasing students doesn't mean we're teaching them. It doesn't mean that your lecturing has improved. And I don't see anybody jumping out the screen and waving at me and saying, I don't agree with you over that. I do want my scores to just get better and better. And the only ones I'm going to submit for probation or promotion are the good scores. On the contrary, I think for both of those events, it's better if you've got a really bad score Okay, so you're getting students saying, I didn't see the point of this, I didn't like it, it pushed me out of my comfort zone at a point. And then you show what they asked for in that promotional document is your thought processes. So your reflections on why you did what you did, how it worked, and how you would change it the next time. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're changing it for a better score, but you're changing it for the student experience. For example, one of the things might be, I need to prepare my students better for something that I'm going to do off the wall. I know you can corroborate that. Okay, if you choose to do something completely outside of the student's experience, you do have to prepare them. Otherwise, they are going to be completely untrusting of the process of what it is you're doing. And then you can get good reflections after that, because then they understand what you're doing, and if they get used to that, then that's also good. So the process of integrating your reflections with the kind of responses that you're getting is an important one. And I'll come back now to what Philippe raised at the beginning, which is yes, student feedback is important, and it would be nice if you could get more than a tiny percentage of the class responding. So some of the ways we need to think about that is, if you're using Blue Explorers, maybe you need to discuss Blue Explorers with your class. Maybe your class rep needs to allocate certain students to respond. And that's something that the wider university is also looking at in terms of feedback. Do students in certain courses get mandated to respond to certain surveys in a global sense? Because then at least we're going to be getting at least some kind of response. But if you're doing a CHSE survey, which, and I do want to see hands up if you don't know what those are, and if you haven't had experience with them, I can give you some of that information if you do want it, but otherwise I'm assuming that most people know what our unit can offer you in terms of small group teaching. So if you do those kinds of surveys, you're not going to get big numbers, obviously. And so what you need to be able to do is to understand what students are saying and incorporate that into your reflection on what the teaching is. So it's not about the score. It really isn't. Neither in the big situation nor in the small situation. Although starting off with a low score, where you play it off, where you mitigate, where you say what you've done and how you've done it, I think gives you a stronger grasp on what their teaching portfolio is and how it can be scored when you put it into situations where it counts, like for an award or for your probation or promotion or those kinds of circumstances. Okay, so I'm going to take a stop here and see that Abiwa has asked more about the CHSE evaluations. Abiwa, do you want to go ahead and ask me?
Oh, sorry, I thought you didn't see the question. No, I just wanted to ask more about the CHSE evaluation. I'm aware of the CLTD ones, and then just sort of our own internal, we do like a course evaluation, and maybe some of the educators will create their own, just like Tina is saying. But I just wanted to know more about the CHSE one.
Okay, so your internal ones are great for your own internal growth and development and discussions, etc. But those can't be used in a formal sense for the university staffing and promotions system, if you want to look at it that way. They will either accept a CLTD evaluation or, after lots of discussion, a CHSE evaluation. So these are the options that CHSE offers. For those of you who know, you can take a quick refresher. Okay. Why would we do it? Well, we do it because we do want that feedback. And then what do we offer? So at the moment, there are 4 surveys. Soon to be 5, I'll say. So the idea of small group teaching, so whether it's at the bedside or not, so clinical tutorial, then actual bedside teaching, or of course chairside teaching if you're in dentistry. There's a specific survey on research supervision and a kind of mentorship add-on if that's what you want. So if you've got postgraduate students who you're actively supervising, not just registrars, because registrars can come into some of the other teaching. And then there's a self-assessment of teaching, which we really, really like to do, because one of the things you can do is you can then contrast your self-assessment with the responses you're getting back from your students. The one that I have not here added to the list is the peer review, because we did have an old peer review system in the faculty where somebody in your department could come in and fill in a form and there's your peer review. We've now moved away from that. You can request a peer review from CHSE, and it actually is on the on the request list when you go into the correct address, and I'll put that in the chat now. And either one of the education developers will come and do a peer review for you, or we're in the process, as you know, of training a group of people to peer review other peers. Those are people who've done our postgraduate diploma and are involved in, to some extent, the scholarship of teaching and learning. And so they'll be looking for things about reviewing your teaching, not anything to do with content, but of course, it's how you mediate that content to the student that they would then be looking at as teaching. So those are the offerings that CHSE has. I'm seeing that we've got all the things of what each thing goes through, but while I'm flicking through is to take you to this slide here, which gives you the address that you need to write to if you want an evaluation. I do have to say, people do send me requests for evaluations to my name personally, and that doesn't work so well because my email is, a lot of you know, is a complete washing machine. And what I do is I then send them through to the evaluation address, and sometimes I think I've sent them through and I haven't. So if you have asked me personally for an evaluation and you haven't had a response, it would probably be better if you do go to this address over here. Christine, if you can drop it in the chat for me, I would very much appreciate that. Because that's the space where you're going to get responded to, hopefully, and people will come back to you about those. Abiwe, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Shirra. I wanted to also find out the format of the surveys. What format is CHSC using?
So it is an online survey that gets sent to your students. It's anonymous, so your students send back their comments and you can't tell who it was. And then it gets collated into a report under a CHSE banner and then gets returned to you. So there are different kinds of questions that we use, which have all had to go through the CLTD process. And in fact, it even went through the faculty board process. So the people have agreed that these are the questions that will be asked. It's very similar to the kinds of things that Blue asks. But there is space also for comments and for student comments, feedback, you know, actual qualitative stuff. So you get that as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So you can recommend to any staff member, from, you know, the boondocks out there, not you, Tina, but anybody. Thanks, Arshad. Thanks for doing that for me. And it is perfectly acceptable in the format that you need for those probation promotions, etc. But it's not an absolute requirement for this concept of developing the literacy of how to integrate your student comments with the requirements of your teaching portfolio. And principally there, I'm talking about developing a teaching philosophy. Yeah, Dr. Dan, you want to go ahead?
Hi, Shirra. Thank you. I see I've got Dumani there, but you always spot me as Dr. Dan.
I know you.
I wanted to ask, is the CSHE evaluation different from the CLTD one in terms of application? Can you please just clarify me on that? Thank you.
So they are. The CLTD at the moment is only doing evaluations using this company, Blue Explorers, and they've got very strict rules about how it is you can apply for an evaluation using Blue Explorers. So if you want an ad hoc where you're teaching students at the chair side or you've got postgraduate students or you've got small group teaching, then it's better if you ask the CHSE to do it, because we're at least in tune with the kind of teaching that you're doing, and you will still get a formal report. CLTD at the moment just does not seem capable. And at the moment, in fact, the whole evaluations portfolio has moved from CLTD to the Quality Assurance Office, to QAPO, and is now coming under the responsible leadership of the new director of education in the Office of the Provost, which is like related to the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic. So at the moment, they're still understanding the extent of the system that they've got and where it fits in. And they're trying to make this a sort of quality assurance play. And so it's much less, in their view, about having lecturers individually evaluated. They're not interested in that. They're seeing that as purely developmental, and we must look after our own development and our own ways of helping lecturers to improve their teaching. What they're interested in is course evaluations and whether the student experience in a course is worthwhile. So that's a completely different take on it. And I'm waiting to see how they play that out, particularly in our faculty, but also with regard to what counts and what doesn't count. At the moment, for our staffing and promotion, your individual lecture evaluations do count. So they are looked at as part of your teaching portfolio. So the first thing you'll find is if there are no evaluations, then your portfolio will be sent back. But even if there are evaluations, if they're there, just stuck on the end without any kind of discussion through the portfolio, so then there is discussion about how much this person has integrated the idea of feedback with their teaching. And it's an interesting thing to see how people start to say the same things. They're starting to get a hang of what they think they're looking for in a teaching portfolio with regard to that reflection. Yeah, you want to join us?
Yes, thank you very much for that explanation. Do you mind just putting up that slide where showing the information where we can apply in the email address? So I can just capture that again. Thank you very much.
Sure. Arshad has dropped it in a chat. So if you want to open the chat and see the hashtag address, you have to keep the hashtag in. If you don't do the hashtag, then it doesn't get to us. So it's FAC-staff-eval1word.chse. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to ask you now what you think you need to assist you in taking that student feedback that you get, whether it's informal or whether it is through the formal channels, and how to integrate that into your teaching portfolio. So looking at, on the one hand, your teaching philosophy, and then that whole list of stuff on that document, which is all the places that you teach and all the students that you teach. I can even drop that document in the chat if you're interested. It's from HR. It's the promotion CV format document that everybody has to fill in. So in other words, it's not a bad idea, even if you're not thinking about promotion for this year, to start filling it in. And you can transfer a lot of your probation information into that document so that you've got a record of who you've taught, when you've taught, what your responsibilities were in that teaching. And it also gives you some idea of how you can progress, because areas that you can get involved in, like making decisions about curriculum, etc. Yes, I will do that. It's a Word document, Tina. It's not that difficult to find. I'm sorry, I'm just working on a new device, so I'm not sure from which screen I can pull it. But what I might do is just email it to Arshad and he can drop it in for you. Yeah. So, Daniela, I agree with you. The document's not perfect. So if you're doing a different style of teaching, like as you're saying in an integrated program, how can you say these hours are mine and those hours are not mine? So in a way, you need to sit down as a team and talk about who takes primary responsibility for certain things and who's just involved in being there in other things, and you start filling in the list like that, because otherwise you can get tied up very quickly. And there are certain things that people do see. So, for example, Jabu, you'll know that because of staff constraints, etc., some classes are taught all together. So you can have physios, nurses, and dentists all in the same, for example, pharmacology class. And then when you see people filling in the forms, they fill in different hours for each one of those, even though we know that they were the same hour that 3 different classes were taught. So, I mean, there is a certain amount of kind of academic honesty that we're asking for in regard to a teaching portfolio. So although the form itself is really restrictive and I was going to say accounting style, you're not bound by that when you're submitting a teaching portfolio. And what you can do is say, just see the teaching portfolio attached as Appendix A and ignore all of that. You can, and then put it in the teaching portfolio, which makes it much easier to manage. You can say this is a collaboratively taught class, and for some I prepare, and for others I attend and facilitate, which is not hard work. So I mean, it's absolutely perfect to include that. But you can say what you take principal responsibility for. Yeah, I mean, you can put links to that, to Ulwazi, to what you've done. You don't have to restrict yourself to that yellow form. And in fact, later on in this series, we're going to be going through looking at how it is we could evaluate that teaching portfolio. So here I'm talking about the literacy of understanding. You do have to integrate your feedback into the discussion of what you're saying is your teaching philosophy, for example, or setting your teaching goals, what they might have been, how you achieved some of them, how you reset, different goals. Those kinds of things really make a teaching portfolio come alive. And it's those things that win you the prize. Hey, Tina, it's about, showing people how it is that you have progressed and developed as that individual teacher. I'm just going to take a minute and stop talking. So it would be lovely if you would talk and maybe share some of your experiences with developing that portfolio, or also integrating your thinking of feedback with your philosophy. Because, by the way, the philosophy is supposed to be something that grows with you, and that can change. It's a dynamic thing. And I see a lot of people from promotion to promotion to promotion are using the same philosophy. So I don't know what that says about how we work. Tina, go ahead.
Sure, I just have a query. It's often when you're trying to put forward a teaching portfolio and the first time you hear that it's actually not appropriate or it's not correct or it's missing a few things is when you're going for the promotion criteria committee. And are there any people in the faculty that are willing to vet these documents pre-sending them in? Do we have anything like that in place?
You sure you do. CHSE is open to that completely. In fact, I counsel a lot of people who get told by HR, you don't have a teaching portfolio, you better go downstairs and talk to them. And then we start from scratch. What is a portfolio? How do you do it? What do you need to do to get it? And then when people have gone away and put it together, then they do send it through to us and we do give them feedback. Daniela, have you had that experience, or you want to share to the discussion?
Thanks, Shirra. I'm a bit ill. I was going to suggest that perhaps what HR needs to do, because you did what's helped me was the previous webinar series.
Yes.
Which I went back to that. So I think it helps if they put that as a link, because that was told to me, but I didn't find you in your office. So that's how I landed up at YouTube. So my advice is somebody that in HR, even if you can't make an appointment to physically see yourself or Lizelle, that these webinars, someone can then watch it And then I think even there was time, if it's you or somebody else mentioned some templates of how to create the teaching portfolio. There was a webinar on teaching philosophies. So it helps if, if you haven't gone through the PG dip, but then you watch the webinars and then you know how to actually make sure you create a good teaching portfolio.
Well, I'm really glad that the webinar was helpful in that case because, yeah, the idea really is that we can assist, and we're happy to do that. So I don't have to physically be in my office. You can message me through lots of ways, even on Teams like this, or yes, email. I'm not claiming the email responses are too fast, but yeah, you even have my WhatsApp number for most people. And we can organize someone in the team to actually sit with you, even if it's online, just to look at what you've got and sort out where we think you could not only improve your teaching portfolio, but where there are areas where you could probably develop that reflection in order to make it just that wow, that's that thing that helps people to see what your teaching actually is. Okay, I'm trying to attach a document here. That's why I'm talking and talking and talking. Let's see if it comes out. I don't know if you need my permission now to open it. So will somebody try and open it and see? Yes, so Nabila, that's one of the things we do have to add on the list. That it's not just the evaluation of your overall teaching, but specific types of teaching if you require evaluations for. And as Nabila says, we've developed for the SIM Lab a specific evaluation of how you ran your SIM, which is also for developmental feedback, so that you then improve as a facilitator, as a debriefer, and as a person who can improve their simulation pedagogy, like designing sims, etc. But also they can be used for building your reflections and your integrating it into your philosophies. Well, somebody let me know if you can't access that document, if it's not available. Okay, further questions, further problems? I do want to know if you now feel a little bit more confident about what you're supposed to do with the evaluation once you get it. The idea is to try and integrate it into this narrative of teaching that you're doing and your trajectory on becoming a university teacher, and how it is that you can then incorporate those specific comments into kind of improvement. Also, yeah, if students love something, you can talk about how you could keep that enthusiasm going. There we are. Okay, lots of discussion going on above. Was that you advertising as sneeze, or are you going to say something?
I'll collate all of the videos from the professional learning series on teaching portfolios and send it in the next to anybody who drops their email in the chat.
Yeah, that's perfect. Pleasure. Philippe, thanks for joining us, and I hope it was useful for you. And Christine, I think that will be useful too, because of course we've done the standard, what you put into your teaching portfolio, how do you construct it, but we've also had a couple on how it's adjudicated, and that's something that we could go through again in this literacy series. And the reason why we're talking about it upfront right now is because when we start unpacking literacies of students or our own literacies in relation to how it is that we cope with all this stuff when we're teaching, like the digital literacy and the AI literacy and the information literacy. So then all those things are important to be able to say how you as a person have developed when you're looking at improving that aspect of your own literacy. And that's something that you can keep a track record of. And the teaching portfolio is a perfect place to do it, because it's there that you're going to exercise all of those literacies with developing yourself and developing your class. So that's why we wanted to do it up front. I see people are putting emails in the chat for you, Christine, but we also have a list of who's here. So we're very happy to send it out to everyone. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. It's enough of me talking for the day. If there are questions, if there are things you want to talk about, and Tina, I specifically want to talk to you, please, about the incorporation of blue experience in this new contract. And they're looking for, COAPA is looking for people who would like to give feedback on the kinds of things that they're doing at the moment. And it strikes me that for your school, you would probably be a really good person to do that. Just to join in and give them feedback on what they're offering us. Because with the new contract, it was explicitly stated that they had to have an offering for the Faculty of Health Sciences. The new contract started on the 1st of February, and I have not yet seen evidence of that, but it could just be that they need assistance in feedback from us about what we're wanting, and I would like to be able to give it to them. Like, wide feedback from the whole faculty, everybody know what they want. Okay, I'm seeing lots of email addresses in the chat. I'm gonna, yes, leave it there. If anybody does have any questions, comments further, I'm very happy to listen to it. So then let me give you an advance warning for next week. Next week, Lizelle is going to be taking the Wednesday webinar, and she'll be talking, she'll be myth busting about blended learning. What is blended learning? What isn't blended learning? As again, the last of the introductory series before we go into next month's offerings, which will start hitting the heavy literacies. So I'm sure you guys are looking forward to that. She's got some really interesting info about what people think blended learning is and perhaps what it really is. So we'll see you again next week. In the meantime, have a great week and thanks for coming this week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Shirra.
Thank you so much.